Hey, hello everybody. It is time for the golf webinar presented by Orange Whip. My name is Steve. I'm the Director of Marketing with the Orange Whip. We have a great guest today, and we're very happy. We've had a great response for these webinars, so look in the future. We're going to have more and more of these, but today we're really excited. We have a great guest. Before we get started, we have a few things I just want to go over. For all you attendees, you'll have a control panel on the right side of your screen. If you can't see it, there's probably an orange arrow. You can click and unclick that, and the control panel will get larger or smaller. Also, there is a question bar in the control panel. You will be able to ask questions, so please enter any questions you want. We'll get to as many as we can at the end. The last 10 minutes we'll save for question and answer. And if we don't get to those, we will follow up with those other questions here after the webinar. It's about 30 to 45 minutes today. And like I said, 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes Q&A. The recording for the webinar will be available, so if you have to jump off, or for attendees that aren't showing up, you'll get an email with that. And also we'll post it to YouTube, social media, our website, so keep a lookout for the recording. Also, for you PGA professionals, we're working on getting MSR points attached to this webinar. It is a little process, so that's kind of to be determined at this point. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll send out some emails as we move forward as well. Right now, I'd just like to introduce Jim Hackenberg. He's the owner and developer of the Orange Whip. He's going to give us a little brief intro and introduce our guest today. So, Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, I'm very excited about the webinar today. It's a great way for us to promote, what the Orange Whip does for golfers, as well as what it can do in your off season. Because as you can tell by the image on the screen, it's getting cold outside. And I tell you what, I grew up in North Dakota, and I would have to hang up my golf clubs every fall. I wouldn't do anything golf related until the spring, so I had to relearn my golf swing, which is a big disappointment because I'd spent the whole season working on my game, working on my swing, getting everything in shape for golf, and then I hang it up. So one of the main factors of the Orange Whip was that I wanted people to have something to swing in the off season to maintain that golf motion, to keep their flexibility, and improve their whole motion. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to Sean Kennedy, because Sean, a good friend of mine who also grew up in a northern climate, he grew up in Wisconsin, so he knows what the off season's like. But we both chose to move to the south and get in a little bit warmer weather. But Sean has a much farther, let's say, education in the results, or what the body can do, and some things you can do in the off season as well as during the full season to improve your functional movements as well as improve your golfing longevity. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean. He's going to be able to provide you with a lot of information, and please forward us some questions. We'd love to take part in that. And I think you're going to enjoy this. I've already learned quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to learning some more today. So let's get right into it. Sean, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Very excited to be here, and thanks for all the attendees for joining us. I'm just going to kind of get going and introduce what I like to do with my athletes. And if you know anything about functional movement, this is not groundbreaking information. And to let you all know, first of all, I am not an expert in fitness. There are lots of fitness experts out there. I've been lucky enough to glean information from Dr. Gary Gray and Dr. Dave Tiberio. And lucky for me, at the Cliffs Clubs where I work, there are Gray Institute fellows that I get to work with. So what I know is basically what I've learned from them. So Dr. Matt Ort, who's a doctor of chiropractic, he's also a NG360, which is Nike Golf, which doesn't really exist anymore, but we still get to keep that title. And he is also a Gray Institute Fellow in Applied Functional Science. Vance Farino, so when this slide comes up, you can see Vance is, he's got a lot of titles beside his name. And we like to call him the godfather of function. So a lot of the terminology that I'll be using, I've stolen from this individual. And also Joan Craig, who is, when I first got to the Cliffs, I had some serious back issues, and she kind of turned my life around. So those are the three people that I lean on a lot when I am learning new things about biomechanics. Um, there was a great thing that was just happened out in Phoenix with Dr. Sasha McKenzie and Dr. Phil Cheatham, and then another golf professional, his from Canada. His name's Liam Mucklow, and they just did this forces and torques motion seminar out there, and there's a lot of interesting information. So one of the slides I've actually stolen from Dr. Phil there too. So Dr. Phil, if you're listening, thanks again for all your knowledge. I'm going to go over some basic ideas for joint motion, and joints work in three planes of motion. So sagittal, frontal, and transverse. If you're looking at the slide there, the sagittal plane kind of works from back to front, the frontal plane works from side to side, and the transverse one works in rotation. And the golf swing is a pretty complex deal, and all three planes of motion are something that we need to be concerned with when I'm working with my athletes. And I say my athletes, most of the people that I'm coaching at the Cliffs are over 60. So if you coach those same kind of people, this information, get your notebook out and start taking some notes. So here's the slide that I stole from Dr. Cheatham, the 6 degrees of freedom of movement, and to try to get people to control or stabilize what we call from the Gray Institute most stability. That's why these 5 little simple movements that we're going to introduce to you I feel are really important. And we're talking about off-season training. Just know that it's just not off-season. This is kind of an all-the-time kind of a deal. So I like to start function with a solid foundation. And that foundation starts with good balance, agility, stability, and endurance. So if I have the opportunity to actually teach a fitness class, this is kind of the baseline, if you will, that I work off of. And all the athletes come in all shapes and sizes and forms. If you're looking here, we got, you got 3 different postures, you got a couple different age groups. So I can't fit everybody into the same box, but with these 5 functional movements, I can learn and understand where their blind spots are or where they might lack in their most stability, and I can help build a training regimen around what I see fit. And what I've learned from Vance Farino is that we treat function as a sphere, and in golf, the ball is inside that sphere. And this little function compass that you see in front of you, we use this for all these exercises that we're going to introduce. And what I try to get my athletes to do is kind of increase their threshold, if you will, or make their sphere of function as big as they can. So now we're just kind of ready to get into these 5 basic movements. And these movements have been around for a long time. This is, like I said, this is not groundbreaking, this is not new, but this is a wonderful way if you do have any of your players that are interested in some basic fitness ideas. And these are something that I preach that they can do daily on a daily basis. So when I'm teaching balance, it's never static, it's always dynamic. My lunge pattern will kind of, if I do a balance with drivers, my lunge pattern will pretty much mirror that. But as you'll kind of understand and learn that there's a myriad of different patterns that we can do. And squatting is a fun one. When I do junior camps and clinics, this is they always call this camping. If you get that joke, well then great. If not, maybe I can explain it later at the end of the webinar. There's a bunch of different chop patterns that we can discuss as well. I'll probably just show you a couple simple ones through the slides, and arm and shoulder presses to build stability in the shoulders and the scapular region is a pretty big deal too. I don't have kettlebell swings in here, but those are also good ones as well. So let's jump into it. So what I like to do is what I learned from the Dr. Gray and Dr. Tiberio is that the exercise is the test and the test is the exercise. So when I'm doing player evaluations, yeah, I don't need to go into a gym or anything. I just usually have them grab their golf club and I'll run them through these simple exercises and or tests. So I got a little single leg balance, and the one I'm going to show you, right, it's just going to have like a leg driver. So I'm going to kind of click through here. Be patient with me as there's a little bit of a lag when the slides are showing up. So again, single leg balance, then this is with a leg driver. And I'm kind of working my way around that function compass that you saw back there a couple slides ago. And you can see right now I got a little club on the ground. So depending on the agility of my particular athlete, right, if that looks too easy for them, I'll just maybe sneak that club away from them and see how they can manage this same balance exercise with the leg driver without a club for a little bit of support. So now we're going to go and show you just real simple little lunge pattern that again is going to mirror that balance. And these are going to be lunges with reach. I'm using a golf club. If you're in a gym and you wanted to use a med ball or you had a dumbbell or there's a lot of different cool tools out there. Now we have a tool, it's called the Viper. I actually use orange whips a lot when I do this, and sometimes I'll make them shake the whip for a little bit of kind of stability exercise as well. And again, I'm just going to kind of work around this. So that was kind of me. There's a little reach with the club in my hands. Now I'm going to hold each end of the club, reach and come back to home. And now I'm going to kind of hold with my hands a little closer together and reach and come back to the hole, come back to home. So in squatology, right, also known as camping, we have different foot positions for this. And we'll kind of like click through these as well. And ultimately, there can be 27 different foot positions. So when we kind of get to the Q&A at the end, anybody's got any questions on that? You can ask me then. You can also find me on Twitter, or my email address will come up later too. So as we're kind of clicking through the squats, this is just basic, real simple functional stuff. This is squats is one of my favorite exercises for a lot of lower body stability. Also kind of getting some interaction with the ground. It's also, I kind of also use it as a test for sequencing a little bit. So when I watch somebody squat, are they bending forward first before they're pushing their pelvis back? Real simple things like that, real little cues that I can kind of start to understand that, okay, when I'm watching them do this exercise, I have an idea or something I would expect to see in their golf swing. So there is a wide stance squat. And again, right, I'm just holding a golf club like I normally would. Again, you can do this with a dumbbell, so you can do dumbbell reaches. I'm not doing any of the, we'll say, more complex ones, if you will. So, we got a question there that popped up. Somebody asked me what I meant by camping. So maybe with that picture, you might get an idea what I was talking about when I was talking about camping. So in one of my junior golf clinics, we were going through a squatology, we'll just call that a matrix, if you will. And this little 7-year-old boy is like, oh yeah, this is like just what I do when I go camp. And so I asked him, I was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, like when you're in the woods and there's no bathroom, you got to squat. I was like, perfect. So in junior camps now, we don't call it squatology, we just call it camping. So now I'm going to go to a narrow stance, do a full squat. And the motion of this idea is like the pelvis goes back first. Um, there's a lot of different concepts out there on proper form for squatting. If you know any Gray Institute trained people or TPI trained people, seek them out for advice on what they feel that the proper form is for a squat. Really, I don't get overly concerned at form. I'm more looking at the sequence of motion. And when I see a sequence, if you will, that is maybe not best for that individual, I'll just kind of cue them up and say, hey, you kind of want to push your pelvis back first before you start to kind of work your way down into that squat. Another question popped up about me working my way around the function compass. No, I did not work my way all the way around the compass when I was showing you those lunges. I was just doing a forward lunge with a reach. But normally, depending on we'll say the balance driver that I would do with that player, that particular lunge matrix would mirror that. And usually the balance driver and the lunge that I will pick, I'll usually pick it so say I have a player who has an issue with some internal rotation of their trail hip. So I will make a balance driver, single leg balance, and I'll have them rotate in that direction, and then that lunge would pretty much follow that same kind of position. So that lunge, maybe when we kind of get towards the end here, I might stand up and show you some of those if there's enough room to do it here. So now I'm going to go into a stagger stance. And my feet in this particular instance, my feet are neutral, meaning both my toes are pointed forward. And like I said, there's 27 different foot positions. So I could externally rotate both my feet. I could internally rotate both my feet. I could internally rotate one foot and externally rotate one foot. Or I could just externally rotate one foot or internally rotate one foot. So you're kind of starting to get an understanding of all the different positions that I can place my feet in just to put different loads on those joints when I'm doing these squats. So there's a little staggering of the feet. And I'm going to get to my favorite exercise for golf function. And this is pretty much the one I will use to test any athlete of any age, of any ability. It's going to give me a real good idea of their most ability throughout their entire body. So when I start to click through these, you'll kind of see you'll see me do one to the right and one to the left, but you'll kind of get an understanding, and I'll go through a little bit more detail of the things that I particularly look for when I'm asking an athlete to do this in front of me. And this is part of normally when I'm working with a student, we'll say on a one-on-one private lesson, this is a big part of the warm-up process before we even start hitting balls. So most of my players already know that they're going to be, stretching, maybe doing some balance drills to kind of warm up their feet and their ankles a little bit and get them moving, and also do some of these chopping motions. And this is a circle chop. There's a whole bunch of different chops out there. Rotational chops are big ones for me. Scoop chops are big ones for me. Sometimes scoop chops with an actual throw of a med ball. If I'm working on some explosive speed with the player, it's something I like to use a lot too. So this is kind of these are still photographs of what a circle chop looks like. And I'm looking for some things. So when a player kind of starts their rotation, do I get to see the back of their lead shoulder? And then when they start to go down and make the circle with their hands, right, how does their forward flexion work? How does their body bend? How do their feet interact with the ground? And then how do their knees react to their feet interacting with the ground? How low can they make that circle? And as they're coming back up on the other side, right, I'm kind of looking how those feet again are interacting with the ground. So ankle mobility I feel in golf is a pretty big deal. That's just my opinion. And when they're working their way back up, well, can I see the back of that trail shoulder? And I'm also kind of looking at the cervical spine, what is their neck doing in this particular instance? Can they keep their eyes forward, or is it awkward for them to keep their eyes forward? And I'm just going to circle back around the other way. Again, looking for those same kind of cues. And I always got my little notepad out, I'm just kind of jotting down things that I see. A lot of times if I see like a foot action that looks strange to me, and then when the player starts hitting balls, I'll cue in on that foot pretty early to see if I notice that same kind of issue as when they were making this circle chop motion.
Say, Sean, this is Jim. Would in these motions, do you think it's important to do it both sided so it's an equal workout or a balanced workout? So it's, I mean, it may be a right-handed golfer, but it seems as if you want us to go one way and then back the other for an equal workout. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Jim. Obviously, balance in the body, I feel is kind of a big deal. So yes, it's not just one-sided. Most of us kind of like when we hit golf balls, a lot of the coaching that I'll do, especially when we're working with Orange Whip with players, like so they're a right-handed golfer, I'll usually make them do twice as many left-handed as they would right-handed. Try to keep them balanced.
Good idea. Good.
So that's, circle chop with the golf club. Like I said, you don't need med balls or dumbbells to do these exercises. You don't even really need a golf club. You could just put the players' hands together, or you could have them hold a head cover. You could have them hold that club differently. I like that kind of martini glass pose to start off with, simply because again, I'm kind of looking at their mid-thoracic flexibility a little bit too. So when they get that thing kind of moving around them, I get a good idea on how this player in front of me can move and what can I expect in their golf swing. And based on their limitations or sometimes hypermobility, how I may attack the technical aspect of changing that person's movement pattern. So pushes and pulls. So I got this as the 3D dumbbell matrix. And off to the side there, if you are training athletes, make sure if you're going to put dumbbells in their hand that it matches the athlete's ability. A lot of times, egos can get in the way sometimes when we're in the training process. And, so say I got like a 65-year-old fella in there and he's going to go and grab that 15-pound dumbbell rack and start whipping these things around him in this dumbbell matrix. I will immediately snatch those out of his hand and give him probably a 5-pound pair of dumbbells. So he's got 5 pounds in each hand, and then I will just coach him as best I can to think about more about the form, because we're not necessarily here to build strength. I'm more concerned about, we'll say initially, that individual's mobility than I am about their strength. So this little, like the first few that I'm going to do, simple overhead press. Now I'm kind of kicking out to the side, and you can see how kind of my pelvis kind of helped me move that out. And again, when I talk about that sphere of function, right, I try to coach the players when we first start to do this, show me your end range of motion. How far can you reach out there? So now I got a little bit of rotation involved with that same move that I just made, right? So I'm working in that transverse plane a little bit. So I'm rotating and then I'm pushing outward. I'm going to rotate the opposite direction. Again, when I'm doing this, a lot of little mobility things that I like to look for. That cervical spine is a really big one. try, I always coach that individual or that group of people in front of me. Do your best to keep your eyes forward when you're doing these exercises so I can kind of scan and see some of that neck mobility. So here we got a little bit of a upward 45 push, right, with some rotation. Going to do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm just working straight across my body here. So driving in that rotational plane. Got a question here. How long do all these exercises take? You can run through, I would say, all 5 of these movement patterns comfortably. It depends on how complex they're going to be, but if you're starting really simply, I think you can move through all 5 of them in no more than 10 to 12 minutes. And before that, I just saw another question, not really about the circle chop, but when doing the overhead deep squat, how common is it for the student's form to be affected by shoulder mobility rather than lower body mobility? I guess I'm not fully understanding what the deep overhead squat. So, like you're holding something over your head and you're making a squat. Yeah, I would say it's also affected a lot by core stability. So players who don't have necessarily a real stable core, if they're holding something over their head and they try to squat down, it'll be really difficult then for them to manage that particular squat. And then I finish this up. So there's 6. It's a simple 6 pattern for the pushes and pulls or the dumbbell matrix. And I finish up with these uppercuts. And when the player's doing the uppercuts, I really like to pay attention to how they're doing the uppercut. And most commonly, I would say over 90% of the athletes that I see for the first time doing this, they usually just swing their arms. Even though I'll demonstrate that I'm not asking them to swing their arms, I try to get them to fix their arm in kind of a 90-degree position, as you can see where my arm is right there. And I'll ask them actually to use rotation and drive their pelvis to lift their arm and the weight that they're holding. But most of them, they'll just kind of swing their arms back and forth. So here I got an athlete, and we are using the orange peel. So like I said, you don't necessarily need props, meaning med balls, dumbbells, uh, TheraBands, TRX bands. There's a lot of cool stuff out there to use in your workouts, for sure. But a lot of times too, since I always have kind of a peel with me on the range deck, I will use this, and I will use it to kind of help a player if I see some issues with their ankle complex. So we like that ankle to be able to invert and evert and also kind of go into dorsiflexion and a little bit of extension. And that orange peel is like, the first time I saw it, I was like, well, I don't know if Jim really knows this or not, but I mean, this is like a nice kind of biomechanical device because I can make people squat on this. And if I'm in the gym, a lot of times too, in my fitness classes, right, we got peels all around and we'll just kind of do some of our lunges onto the peel to kind of help increase that foot ankle mobility. And since it is wintertime, sometimes I don't have an indoor training facility. So sometimes my lessons end up being more about, hey, what can I do since I can't go out and hit balls right now because it's cold and rainy or snowy? Well, what can I do? And most of you are probably familiar with the Orange Whip Challenge. At the Cliffs, we've kind of taken that to heart. And what we get right, we get them going on the peels, and we'll stagger their stances. We'll go wide, we'll go narrow, we'll go, front foot externally rotated from a athletic stance with a orange whip, and we'll go 10 swings that way, flip that stance around, go 10 swings the other way. So we just keep them moving, keep their mobility up. And one of my favorite things about the orange whip itself, it's like I call it the automatic sequencer. So it's a people start to realize that, hey, I don't maybe necessarily feel this when I swing my golf club. And I get questions all the time. Is this kind of what it's supposed to feel like? And I'm like, yes, that's what you'd like. That's definitely what you'd like it to feel like. Some of the other props that I use when I am confined to indoors. The true stretch was one of my favorites. And if you look at the floor of that true stretch, you can kind of see how it's arched like the orange peel is. That's like what I said when I first saw the peel. I was like, well, holy cow, man, this guy he's on the ball because he's already putting the feet into that kind of like a little bit of inverted position a little bit, and a whole bunch of different stuff we can do that. If anybody has any questions about the true stretch, feel free to ask me. There's the little panel that's on the back there. It basically kind of says, hey, if you're a golfer, these 6 stretches are something you should do. And there's one of our facilities. It's called the Cliffs of Kiwi Springs, and the range deck there, right behind it, there's like a small gym. And a lot of the times for me, I got a player that I can see he's got some real mobility issues, and we'll just, take a little 10-minute break, and I'll go, get him on the true stretch, get him moving a little bit, open him up a little bit. Sometimes I'll even get in there and kind of move them around in the stretch, and then we'll come back out and kind of get back into the technical aspect of the lesson, just so they can get a better sense or feel. What ages do I normally teach? Here at the Cliffs, mostly for the most part, I would say 96% of my clientele is over 60. I am fortunate enough there are a few high level players that, come to see me for some advice. Mostly they're on the road that much, so there's not a whole lot of teaching going on. I would call that more of a coaching thing, but I definitely make sure that their fitness regimen when they're on the road, that they're following, we'll say, these 5 functional movements on a daily basis. And juniors can definitely benefit from these exercises and an orange whip. We get to do some junior camps in the summertime, so they're coming up to visit their grandparents, and we definitely incorporate orange whip products in our junior training. There's no doubt about it. And that, they get it. The kids get it. Just like, hey, this is kind of fun. Specifically too, when we get the peel out and we start doing some squatting exercises or some lunging exercises on it, or sometimes even, since they're pretty mobile, we'll even do like some little jumping exercises on it. And I use that peel also to teach chipping and pitching. So it's kind of like helps them feel where I think pressure should be in their feet and things like that. So it's not just I don't use it as a straight exercise tool. I try to get as creative as I can with that product, and try to think outside the box, and it's like, okay, well, what else can I use this for?
Say, Sean, I've got a couple of thoughts and questions regarding, you had mentioned the Orange Whip Challenge, and for those not quite familiar with it, it's a promotion we've tried to enhance by stating if you use your Orange Whip in the various drills that we promote over a 30-day period, your golf swing, your flexibility, your coordination, your sequencing all will greatly improve. And if you incorporate that in with a lot of Sean's 5 functional motions that you can do, you can even find a better improvement. So we ask all of the attendees today to give this a shot. Try it for 30 days. And I think what you're going to find is your golf motion will become much better, but your body will feel better, and it'll be a benefit to your body. So we feel that's a pretty important thing, but we'd like to have people follow it up and do it for the 30 days because I believe they're going to find it useful and they're going to share it with their golfing friends. And also, Sean, another point you were talking about when you were discussing the uppercut motion, and many people will take and they will just move their arm. Similar things happened to me with when I was teaching golf full time and they had a golf club in their hand. They were just swinging their hands and arms. They were not using their body. My objective with the Orange Whip was to get the hands, arms, and body to flow together. So I really appreciated your point with that because so many people they almost take the shortcut rather than the beneficial motion that's going to really create more of a benefit to the body. So I appreciated that point that it's more of a full body motion using the ground as well rather than just their hand and their arm.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny story. I was in Atlanta at the Cherokee Town and Country Club where I worked for a little bit, and had been invited back by the director of golf there, Mark Mongell, to he runs this wonderful event. It's called the Metal Breakfast. It's kind of like their season-ending deal, and he invited a bunch of past pros from the club to come back and play with the membership in the tournament. And so I had the Orange Whip out there, and one of the guys in my group was struggling with sequence big time. Now I know you in a tournament you're not supposed to use training aids, but he was struggling so much, and it was more of a fun event than a competitive event. And I was like, Joe, hey, just do me a favor and swing this for a little bit. And this is not hyperbole. This is actual fact. So, he grabbed it and he tried to make his normal move, which was very upper torso, upper weight quadrant, like, trail shoulder leading kind of a move. And he felt the weight and he's like, well, that doesn't feel very good. I was like, okay, well, swing it so you would like, you're comfortable with how it feels. And immediately he started to get the sequence kind of from the ground up, right? It was wonderful. It was like, and the three other guys in the group were like, well, that's like incredible. So I was like, handed him back his driver. I was like, well, can make sure, see if you can translate it because obviously they don't feel the same, but see if you can translate it. So he was moving it around him a little bit, and he's like, yeah, I think I get it. So we had played 4 holes. The longest drive he hit was maybe 185 yards. Weak, bright, high cuts or pop-ups. Next drive, 245, and it even turned over a little bit. And
Wow.
he looked at me right in the eye and said, I'm stealing this. So I went to Cherokee Town and Country Club with 2 Orange Whips in my bag. I left Cherokee Town and Country Club with 0.
I love those kind of stories. That's great. I appreciate this, Sean. This has been really informative because we're very proud of the Orange Whip, but it's nice to hear some actual practical stories that you use it with, as well as just the knowledge you have in this department has been so helpful for me. So continue on if we've got more information.
So when you're kind of looking at that athlete in front of you, there's just a little progression that I learned from the Gray Institute. You start with something really easy and then make it progressively harder. If you're teaching golf, I'm sure that's kind of a model that you follow. In this little bit of fitness, it's a good model to follow as well. You start with your matrices to be relatively simple, and you build complexity as the athlete improves. To what we'll say I've learned about motor learning, if you will, is you kind of need to push the person or that individual in front of you slightly outside their comfort zone for them to kind of learn something new. You just kind of can't keep doing the same old, and that experience doesn't really make them grow much. And if you can remember what I was saying earlier when I was using the function compass on the ground, right? I'm trying to get that person to find that end range of motion. Well, how far right now can you push it? So when we get together the next time, we'll have a benchmark that we'd maybe even like to try to work a little bit past. And try not to ever exceed that player's threshold. You're maybe trying to push them just outside of it, but you're not trying to cause any injury. When I first kind of started, and I was like, we'll say a little overly excited about my newfound knowledge, and yeah, I may have hurt one or two individuals when I first started training them. But I learned to kind of scale it back and be a better coach, not just on the lesson tee, but in the gym as well. And build off your successes. So kind of once you kind of are reaching that goal that you want to go to, you know, you're an encourager. That's really what a coach is doing. You're pushing that athlete through encouragement and those successes. Uh, Failure is not a bad thing, but you got to have some success to build off of for that next time around to get them to come back and want to push it even further the next time. So just kind of wrapping up, when I am warming up an athlete, I'm going to ask them to do some things that we'll say aren't particularly golf-like. Like that circle chop. A lot of times, you know, a new student will come to me and I'll say, hey, will you do this for me just so I can watch? And I'll get a strange look for them, but they'll go ahead and do it. And, you know, when I start to explain myself, you know, I'm just looking at that person's functional mobility. What can and can they not do? So when they're moving that club around them, if I'm going to try to change or tweak that movement pattern, I got a good understanding of what they can or cannot do. You know, I've seen some golf lessons where, oh, you know, you just got to turn more, Mr. Jones. Well, you know, if Mr. Jones can't turn more, well, what's he going to do? I don't think he's going to get much out of that particular lesson. Like I said, it's not particularly golf specific. It's more or less I am assessing that player's overall functional mobility. It gives me insight in how that player can move a golf club about him. So I already got a good idea of what's going to happen when Mr. Jones picks up that 7-iron and tries to clock one out there. I mentioned that sphere of function before. The golf ball is inside that sphere. It's on the ground in front of you, which is definitely inside that sphere because your feet are on the same ground that golf ball is on. So this framework of function, hopefully it gives you a way to assess your athlete before they even start swinging a golf club. And hopefully, right, if you can get your players to buy into this idea, well, if you feel better, you end up playing better. And this isn't just about golf. I mean, yes, I'm a golf professional and that's how I make my living, but you know, a lot of the people that I coach, so their grandparents and their ability to bend down and be able to pick up their grandchild, that's kind of important to them. So this is just a fun little story about the favorite feedback I've gotten from one of my clients. I'll just click through the next slide. And so as he told me, right, he's been a long-time subscriber to the idea. I've been working with him now for a little over 3 years. And he's like, you know, Sean, I don't really know if my golf game's gotten any better, but I can back my Porsche out of my garage a lot easier, and I can get in and out of it a lot easier. So again, like I said, it doesn't have to be all about golf. Sometimes just being able to move better makes life a little bit better. All right, I'm opening it up for Q&A. Here's my contact info. skennedy@cliffsliving.com and on Twitter at ShawneePierre So if you got any questions, fire them out there. See if I can answer them for you.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Sean. I really like the idea of how you train your athletes in regards to keeping them focused, and you're doing this through successes, which are achievable successes, because you started with a simple procedure and then made it more difficult as they are capable. So I think that's wonderful. And as a coach or as a player, you will learn through these experiences because there's a success. So I think that's fantastic. We did have a question regarding the Orange Whip Challenge and where our attendees can find that information. Those drills can be found at our website, which is orangewhiptrainer.com, or you can visit our YouTube channel, which is Orange Whip Golf. And we've got multiple videos in there that you will find to basically develop these athletic motions that will lead to your golf swing improvement. A lot of times I refer to the movie The Karate Kid. A lot of these are wax on, wax off, paint the fence types of motions, but what they're doing is they're developing a skill. And that was really my whole incentive behind that. So yeah, this has been a great day. Let's pan down to the panel here. There's a question in here from is there a guide for off-season practice for golfers? Sean?
Uh, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I try to make mine, I would say, athlete specific as possible. But like kind of if you go on YouTube, there's a lot of information out there. People that I would recommend, I recommend Jason Glass. I mean, he's got some amazing stuff that's out there. But also, if you're gonna like kind of follow the Jason Glass method, make sure like if he's like training a specific athlete, we'll make sure that you got the mobility and function to do what that person's doing that he's particular coaching at that time. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I have like kind of like little simple clips or YouTube things that links that I can send them with just some of these real basic functional movements. And again, my suggestion is you find a trainer that you trust and get assessed and let him or her build that program around you. Allie Gilbert is another one. She's another one that I really highly recommend. You can find all these people on social media. They're pretty easy to find, and they're way smarter than I am. As far as like another golf professional who knows a lot about movement, a gentleman in the Washington D.C. area. His name is Ryan Cheney. On Twitter, I think he's at Oracle Rio. That guy probably knows more than I'll ever know in my lifetime. I go to him a lot to ask him questions. Hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think about that? So he's another good one to kind of bounce ideas with. Ben Shear, another guy. Him and Debbie Donegal, they do like I don't know if it's on Sirius XM radio. I think they do a radio show, but they're always talking about function and movement. And the TPI website and the Gray Institute website too, both great sources of information for general information.
And Sean, we have a question from an instructor. He states, I have a student that struggles with chipping and pitching. He also appears to have limited range of motion in his wrists. I've worked with him on the traditional fundamentals of putting the ball back in his stance and opening his stance to the target. What else do you suggest? I've never worked with anyone with limited range of motion in their wrists, so I'm not certain as to why the limited motion, but do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any way you could kind of test it, or if he has like an injury that's preventing it either from flexing or extending. If you're familiar at all with like kind of the Runyon method of chipping, that kind of be something I'd go to. So, Mr. Runyon kind of did recommend that you kind of supinate both your forearms before you put your hands on the club, and
Okay.
you're kind of locking yourself, we'll say, into position. And then that way you're using the swing of your arms and your pivot to kind of move that club, not necessarily get caught up in wrist motion.
Okay. We have another question here from the college golf team. This sounds great to implement in November, December, January, February. Are there any team training tips? Like how would you promote this to a team?
Well, the team aspect's great. So a lot of the training I do is, I get individual clients, but when we do the actual fitness part of it, we do it in small groups. So, I get 6 to 10 guys or 6 to 10 ladies, and we're running through these movement patterns together as a small group. And, we just don't do it in the off season. We maybe kind of kick up the intensity a little bit in the off season since we're not getting out to play as much, but it's a year-long thing that we like to do.
And actually, Sean, that reminds me when the Cliffs community and Orange Whip did our golf clinics together, we had pods or different locations where we could do movement patterns here, swing patterns there, and that's kind of a nice thing for a group or a team if you wanted to break up the group a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, great idea. Like you said, those kind of like pods or little circuits, if you will,
Yeah.
kind of circuit training concept.
Okay. Well, Sean, I greatly appreciate you joining us today. And again, I've learned a lot more every time I get to see you. I learn more, so I'm grateful for that. But we appreciate it. And again, check out Sean. He's got information online. You can find him or follow him on Facebook and Twitter. But yeah, this is a great experience for us. So thanks for joining us. I'll have Steve join us in a second.
Jim, thanks so much for inviting me. Always good to be around you.
You bet. Thank you, sir.
Hey everybody, thanks again for joining the webinar. Here's some contact information for us. If you have any questions, product pricing or any other questions about the Orange Whip in general, or even about Sean and how to get some of that information, email us at info@orangewhiptrainer.com. If you have any marketing inquiries for me, you can reach me at steve@orangewhiptrainer.com. And we also have our phone number there. And also the recording, like I mentioned earlier, you'll see it on YouTube. I'll send out a follow-up email with that attached to it, so you'll be able to find that recording in numerous places. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you at the next Orange Whip Golf webinar. Thanks, and have a great day.